Of course, from last week, we had kind of covered the background of ancient Egypt. I went through and I discussed like the importance of the Nile River Valley to Egypt. I talked about the early development of Egypt, like under King Narmer, King Menes, how it began to be unified. We also went and talked about the religion or gods of Egypt. And I think the last thing we did, we talked about mummification, like the process of it. And all that. So that's about where we're up to right now. So we're moving on, of course, to talk about the Old Kingdom, which, of course, the nickname for the Old Kingdom is the Age of Pyramids. Of course, the reason for why it was called that, because of all the different pyramids that were built in ancient Egypt at the time, which from about the 27th to about maybe close to about the 22nd century, there may have been close to 80 pyramids built in ancient Egypt, which is quite a lot overall. Some of these were different kinds of pyramids. You saw in the video by Imhotep built what is considered one of the first pyramids, which was like a type of step pyramid. And the Egyptians kind of go through this evolution of tomb building design, where they go from building like a mastaba to a step pyramid, and eventually to the so-called smooth-sided pyramid, which the Great Pyramid, was the peak design of that overall. We'll also talk about some of the mysterious things that were part of that time period, like the building of the Sphinx. You probably heard about the Sphinx or Great Sphinx. It's kind of very mysterious, about that time. What dynasties usually make up the Old Kingdom? It's kind of debated, but usually the main ones are what is the let me get that out of there. But what is the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth dynasties of Egypt? Although sometimes they'll even include, for some reason, the seventh and eighth, but it's usually third or the sixth dynasties, with the fourth dynasty being the most famous overall. So you can see the time period is like roughly 500-600 years of when the Old Kingdom existed. It was one of the two greatest periods of Egypt, the Old Kingdom, and then the other great period was the New Kingdom. The Middle Kingdom is kind of a weaker period between the other two periods of Egypt. Now, of course, it says here it's like marked with the development of massive burial tombs. That's one thing that the Egyptians, of course, are known for in ancient Egypt. And you may have heard about how in ancient Egypt they started building these sites that are called like a necropolis sites in Egypt to, bury their dead and all that. Most of these sites can be found in what is the West Bank of Egypt, because the Egyptians believed that the sun god Ra was eternal, in that when basically the souls of people died, or souls of the dead, of course, went to the afterlife, they went to the west where the sun went down. And the Egyptians believed that the eternal, the god Ra, like I guess when the sun would go down, he would travel through the underworld and come back up and be reborn. So they believe that your soul never died, or I guess it could never die. Your body was kept intact and you were mummified and stuff like that. And so that's why a lot of the necropolis sites are found on the West Bank. Some people always say it's because of flooding or something like that, but it's mostly because of that. There's a lot of different necropolis sites, of course, in ancient Egypt. Some that I got there, you can see I've got listed in that PowerPoint. Abydos is supposedly one of the oldest necropolis sites, which date back to the King Menes. King Narmer was buried at that site, which is south of Cairo. Also Saqqara, of course, which is near the ancient site of Memphis near Cairo, was where the first pyramids were built, like the step pyramid of Zoser. So that was a famous necropolis site, and a bunch of pyramids were built there too. Midam and Dashur are also two other necropolis sites, which are located south of Cairo. I want to say about 50 miles south of Cairo is where they're at. And a bunch of pyramids have been built there. Like the Midam, they got one called the Midam Pyramid. Dashur's famous for like the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid. Also, I don't have those in there, but we'll get to it later. The Giza Plateau or Giza Burial Complex near Cairo, of course, is also considered another necropolis site. Of course, later we talk about the New Kingdom, probably on Wednesday. That's also the Valley of the Kings is a famous necropolis site, but they stopped building pyramids, They went to rock-cut tombs built into like the bedrock of a mountain. And we'll get to, of course, the reason for that was because of the fact that all the pyramids got robbed later. Now, the earliest type of tomb that the Egyptians really built mostly was what's called a mastaba, or sometimes pronounced a mastaba also as well. And these are mud brick type tombs that they think went back to the time of King Narmer or Menes. They think they were constructing them because at Abydos, they believe that was the kind of tomb was used to bury, the pharaoh Menes or Narmer. And the name of the word mastaba is an Arabic term that the Arabs coined later. And it's kind of different translations of it, but some say it means like mud bench or stone bench because of the fact that it looks like something I think you could sit on, like from a distance, like a bench, I guess, or a bench of mud. And then, of course, there was another name that the Egyptians, like the hieroglyphic name, is pronounced Perzit, which means either house of eternity or eternal house. It was believed to be this type of tomb that would preserve your mummy forever. So your soul would live on, like I said, in the afterlife. And most of these were like superstructure kind of buildings that were built on top of the tomb. Now, usually the Egyptians would build a shaft down to the ground into the earth where they put the burial chamber down here. And then they would store things in there with the mummy, like food and other things they might need in the afterlife. And then they would build a mud brick structure above it to protect the actual tomb underneath. And there might even be a shaft going out or a small shaft so that the mummy's ka or spirit can, leave the actual tomb. Just something that the Egyptians believed. Maybe come and go back and forth, whatever. Sometimes they'd even put some kind of chamber in there, which may have been used in some mastabas for like a mortuary type chamber where they could mummify, the deceased. Sometimes they might even have offering chambers in there or chapels where they could, somebody could go in there and make a sacrifice to the gods or something like that. So yeah, mastabas could be different sizes, some were huge in size, like this one here, the fourth dynasty. Some might be like huge for like a pharaoh or some kind of minister, and then some could be like real small, like around like the Giza complex. They've got numerous like mastabas that were built for like some of the royalty, even some of the workers, things like that, also as well. So that's the kind of early tombs that they were building overall. But a lot of these didn't. A lot of these, like this one, probably have been kind of rebuilt. That's kind of what they look like now. But most of them are in like ruins. If you see one that's not been rebuilt or reconstructed overall. All right, so that's a little bit about the early tombs. And they keep using these mastabas up from the Old Kingdom all the way up to like the New Kingdom. And some pharaohs even, instead of building a pyramid, they build like a mastaba, like that one right there. So now they do think by the third dynasty, there's another pharaoh that comes in, of course, whose name is King Zoser. And it's also sometimes also another name they call him, which is Neterkit. And Zoser was considered to be either the second king of the third dynasty. There's also another theory. He may have been the first king, like in founder. It's kind of debated about which it is. And he lived sometime in the middle of the 27th century BC. That's actually the statue of King Zoser in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. That is considered one of the oldest statues of an Egyptian pharaoh they've ever found. And they think originally that he was going to build a mastaba, but eventually talked one of his ministers into constructing what becomes eventually the first pyramid ever constructed, which is called different names. A lot of people dub it the Pyramid of Zoser or Step Pyramid of Zoser. It is a 6-step pyramid, of course, in design, which I think they think the original height of it was maybe around 205 feet tall, maybe taller than that. It's been debated. It is considered one of the first stone buildings ever built in the world. And it's not made of mud brick, but the outside is limestone. And of course, the interior of it is constructed with granite. And for a long time, it was considered one of the tallest structures in the world before they built, other pyramids that came later overall. Here's kind of a transection of what it looks like, but they do think it started out as a mastaba, and then it was expanded over time. And they do think that the man that built it was a famous minister of Zoser who went by the name Imhotep, who you saw, they think he was some kind of chancellor of what is Zoser. And they don't really know much about Imhotep. There's been all kinds of theories about who he was. They think he was some kind of powerful high priest under Zoser. He was also kind of a jack of all trades. I think some people call him a polymath because he was like this genius that knew like math and mathematics and engineering. He was an architect. He was a priest. He was also a doctor. I think they consider Imhotep to be the father of Egyptian medicine. And later on, he was like deified as the god of medicine by the Ptolemaic dynasty. So he's kind of an interesting figure and very mysterious. They've made a lot of movies about him, in like these mummy movies. I think the first one was in 1932 with Boris Karloff. If you've ever seen that movie, it's like a black and white movie. And I think Karloff plays the guy, I believe, Imhotep. And I think the most famous one recently was in 1999, The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. You may have probably seen that one, I bet, which I show you the little clip at the end, just kind of from that movie right there. So kind of an interesting figure. And so he's the guy they suppose he built it, and the guy that maybe built the first, pyramid ever and influenced everybody else to build pyramids and all that. So anyway, so that was the first, step pyramid that was ever built at that point. So from there, what happened was in the 4th dynasty, there was then this evolution where they went from building like step pyramids to building what we call a smooth-sided pyramid, which we'll get to next, where they basically take out the steps and all that. And one of the first, of course, to do that is a king named King Sneferu, who also goes by the name Saurus, also as well, which I think is the Greek name. Sneferu lived in the kind of like at the end of the 27th, early 26th century, so close to about 2600 BC. So they think when he lived. They consider him to be the founder of the 4th dynasty. So first pharaoh that ruled. They do think that Sneferu, of course, if you know about it, was the father of King Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid later. And during his design, during his reign, he actually built numerous pyramids. Actually, 3 pyramids he constructed, with 2 being somewhat successful that he constructed. I'll kind of go through them real quick here, but he actually built one that was called the Meidum Pyramid, spelled different ways. Use M-A-I or M-E-I-D-U-M. Near a Acropolis site called Meidum. And it's kind of a debate about that pyramid, about whether he built it or not. I think there's a theory that it was built by a third dynasty pharaoh named Huni, Huni, Huni. And so I think it collapsed, and so it was never really used as his tomb. He also built the bent pyramid, the second one he designed. And then he built the red pyramid. And that's the one that eventually became his actual tomb. And that one's considered, the first real true pyramid or smooth-sided pyramid that's actually successful and becomes his actual burial tomb. And that one, the red pyramid, which we'll talk about more about later, really influenced like the Great Pyramid and a lot of the other pyramids, that the smooth-sided pyramids that came later, or more copies of that one and probably any of the other ones overall. Of course, there's the bent pyramid. Like both the bent pyramid and the red pyramid were both built at a site called Dashur, which is about 50 miles south of Cairo, is about where it is. It's called different names. Some people dub it the, I thought it had another name, which is the South Pyramid. I believe that's the name of that they often call it. Yeah, the South Pyramid. And that particular pyramid was built to a height of about, they think, 332 feet tall. So it's much taller than some of the other pyramids that were built before. And of course, it's famous for different things. One of the, of course, most famous things, as you know, is it's famous for its bent shape, which they think may have been designed like that on purpose. It does have two slope angles to it, which is kind of strange. The bottom slope is about 54 degrees, as you see right here. And then about halfway up, they changed the angle of the slope of the pyramid to about 43 degree angle going that way. And of course, some say it was done on purpose because they thought the pyramid might collapse when they were constructing it at such a abrupt angle there, 54 degrees. And so they think that's why it was designed that way. So I don't think it was designed like that on purpose. Just that it was kind of a architectural snafu that kind of occurred with the engineers. And so he eventually didn't, end up using that one as his tomb. Of course, the most famous thing about the bent pyramid is they do think that this pyramid may have been one of the first pyramids that was smooth-sided. Well, they took white limestone casing, they put it on the outside of the pyramid to give it a smooth appearances. And so they do think that all the pyramids, especially by the fourth dynasty, are all white looking. So with like a white limestone casing on the outside. They think that's the way the Great Pyramid looked, and other pyramids that were kind of similar built to it overall. I don't think you have to know the width on each side, but the width on each side of the bent pyramid was about 619 feet. So the size of the bottom's getting, larger overall, the base of it. Then you got the other pyramid, which of course that became more famous than the bent one. This is the red pyramid that gets built. Also sometimes called the North Pyramid. It was constructed in the same location at Dashur, about 50 miles or so south of Cairo. And this, of course, like I said, became the tomb that actually would be where King Sneferu was buried. The actual burial chamber is put inside of it, of course, just like the bent was designed that way as well. And locals call it another name, which is called the Bat Pyramid. It's not because Batman lives in it, but it's because there's like bats that live inside the pyramid, and that's why they call it that, the Bat Pyramid. And it was built with a 43-degree slope to it, which is kind of like the top of the, bent pyramid that we just talked about, previously. And so obviously the red pyramid was kind of influenced by the design of the top part of the bent pyramid, the way it was constructed. and its height, they think, originally was about 345 feet tall. So it's at that point the tallest, pyramid built in Egypt so far. It's still the third tallest pyramid ever constructed in Egypt, behind the Khufu Great Pyramid and the Pyramid of Khufu. That's built after Khufu's pyramid. The base is about 722 feet. So this must be like close to about maybe 12 acres in size. It's getting larger, the base of it. Each side's pretty equal. And one thing it's famous for, of course, why is it called Red Pyramid? Well, most of the pyramids, they got the limestone cut out from a quarry near a place called Tura, which is like actually around close to the Delta area, like not that far from Cairo. And they would ship it to where they're, building the pyramid. But with this pyramid, evidently they use some kind of local limestone quarry, which had reddish iron ore in it, like in the actual limestone. And so it kind of has a slight reddish tint to the actual pyramid, but you weren't supposed to see it because they were, put white limestone on the outside of it. But you can see it's all been stripped off, which pretty much all the pyramids are like that, except Khufu's and the Bent Pyramid. Of course, all these pyramids, they would put like a capstone on the top, which is sometimes called a pyramidion. And anyway, usually there's a theory that the top of the pyramids were engraved in, of course, granite's made out of, but sometimes they put like gold on the top or something like that. So the theory about the pyramids is that they looked all white with a gold top capstone. So anyway, those are like the ones built by Sneferu, the so-called Bent Pyramid, and of course the Red Pyramid. Now then, of course, the other one that's the more famous one, of course, that gets built later by the son of King Sneferu is King Khufu. Also, of course, goes by the name Cheops, which is the Greek name that Herodotus called him later. Of course, they do think that Khufu was the greatest pharaoh of the Old Kingdom. He was, of course, a ruler of the 4th dynasty, its second ruler. And Khufu is discussed by, Herodotus kind of goes through and talks about some of these rulers. He talks about Khufu, he talks about the son of Khufu, King Khafre, and also Menkaure. So we do get a lot of information for Herodotus. I do have a little short video if you want to watch on my YouTube channel that kind of goes into some of the primary source stuff that Herodotus talks about the history of the pyramids being built by them, the 4th dynasty rulers. Although his theories about how they were built, have kind of been debunked a little bit, which I'll kind of go into a little later. Now, here's kind of a map of the Giza complex. Of course, it's located at the Giza Plateau or Giza Burial Complex, which is a pretty huge area. That's kind of west of Cairo. You can see it's got multiple pyramids there with a bunch of other tombs of like nobility. So you've got the workers' tombs that help build the pyramids overall. And you can see it's got, the Pyramid of Khufu, which is nicknamed now the Great Pyramid. Pyramid of Khafre, that was built after that one, second largest. And then you have Pyramid of Menkaure, who was the son of King Khafre, is also down here. His is a little smaller right there. But it's got little minor pyramids, like there's the so-called Queen's Pyramids, which are also over here as well. Now, of course, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Great Pyramid first, a little bit. Of course, the Great Pyramid was, they think, built sometime in the 26th century BC. They think the original height, it's kind of a debate about the original height. I've got, of course, rounded off to 480 feet tall. That's kind of an average, what they think the height was, back then when it was constructed. Of course, I've seen other height numbers like 481, 482 also as well. But it's been stripped, since up to like modern times. And so it's lost a lot of footage at the top. And so they think the original height now is more like 455 feet now. is what the height of it is. So that's kind of shrunk. They still kind of credit 480 feet, because that's what they think it was designed originally. The actual width on each side is pretty accurate. It's about 756 feet on each side, which I think the size of the base of the Great Pyramid is about 13 acres, which is pretty huge. You can really fit all kinds of historical buildings in there. You could put the Colosseum in there, St. Peter's, Basilica can go in there, the Superdome, probably the U.S. Congress, the Capitol building, you can go in there, and other buildings as well. So it's a pretty huge area that you're looking at right there. It's hard to get a good picture of it too, because it's so large in size. They do think by Napoleon's time they had figured out that there were about 2.3 million stone blocks in it that were used to build the Great Pyramid. Each stone block averages anywhere from 2 to 6 tons, with the heavier ones on the bottom, the lighter ones on the top as you go up. Of course, it is considered one of the only 7 wonders of the ancient world that still survives. Some people even include the Sphinx with it as part of the 7 wonders as well. And of course, there's a lot of stories about how did they build the pyramids? What was Herodotus' theories on how they constructed the pyramid and all that. Herodotus in ancient times believed that the pyramid had been built by slaves, which he claims in his histories, the book Histories of Herodotus, that about 100,000 slaves constructed it. That's been debunked. They think that actually skilled workers and probably even farmers and other people pitched in to build the Great Pyramid, especially when the flood season occurred. There was a lot of less work to do, and so people would work on the pyramid. It was kind of seen as this great state project, kind of like I don't know what the WPA was and all that they had during the New Deal. It's like a big WPA project where you're building this great tomb for the pharaoh, and so kind of like people building Hoover Dam or something like that. So it's like this great project that everybody pitched in, and people were kind of prideful about building it and all that. And of course, there are all kinds of theories about what Herodotus said, how it was constructed. Herodotus believed that they used some kind of lever systems or pulley systems that may have been used to lift up blocks to different levels. And that's been debunked. They don't think that happened because it hadn't been invented yet. There were no lever systems and pulley systems yet till Greco-Roman times. There was no scaffolding yet. I know by the New Kingdom they had scaffolding, so they could have used, but they didn't have that either. So the most popular theory about how they, built the pyramids was that they used, of course, brute force, human labor. No draft animals being used, but mostly using some kind of ramping system using mud brick. They actually have evidence around the Temple of Karnak where they show like actual mud brick ramps built up to parts of the temple where they have like pylons and stuff like that. And so that's kind of some evidence, maybe how they may have constructed the pyramid. I guess the mystery is like what happened to the ramp, and all that. That's kind of a big thing. They can't really figure out about that. So there's still a lot of mysteries. They still think that there might be, hidden rooms inside the Great Pyramid. And recently they did actually sent robots into it, and they did find an actual room that's actually inside the Great Pyramid. They're not sure much about how to get into it, except through using robots, So there may be other stuff in there, but they have no idea unless they just take the whole pyramid apart and find out, which I don't think they're going to do that. Of course, the one thing about Khufu's Great Pyramid is that it's has a lot more chambers in it compared to some of the other pyramids that were constructed. So one of the most elaborate ones ever constructed on the inside of it. It's got this grand gallery that runs up to, of course, the main chamber, which I guess is the most famous part of it. which is right here. They do have multiple chambers in it. There's one called the false tomb chamber, which is actually built underground under the pyramid. It's kind of a debate about what that was built for, but they do think it may have been constructed originally for possibly to fool tomb robbers in ancient times. They maybe think that's where the tomb was, and it's already been robbed, and evidently didn't work, and they still robbed it anyway. Also, they have another chamber called the Queen's Chamber. There's been different theories about what that chamber was used for, but some say it was used for maybe where one of his queens was buried. The Arabs originally called it that. Also, some people think it could have been where they put a statue of King Khufu, which represented his spirit as well. That's a popular theory. And they still kind of are debating that one. And then, of course, the main one was the King's Chamber, which is the one right here. That's, of course, the main chamber where they buried Khufu, probably buried him with a lot of different treasure, which has been robbed since ancient times. And you can see how like it's been pried open here, although parts of it was also chipped away by tourists that would come into the chamber and chip it off and take pieces of the actual sarcophagus away. And they do think they constructed that room where the chamber, where the sarcophagus went in as they were building it. And you notice there's no writing on the walls. I don't know if you see that or not. You only find really graffiti inside the pyramid written either by tourists that come in later, or there's also some hieroglyphic writing that they actually found at the top of the chamber, which has the name Khufu written, supposedly, which is supposedly proof that he built it. But there's no writing on the walls at all until really the 5th dynasty starts writing the so-called pyramid texts you may have heard of. And so that's kind of a mystery. You know, some people, there's all kinds of theories about the pyramid, that it wasn't Khufu's and it was built by somebody else and he used it as his, burial chamber. But that's kind of a debated thing, I guess, today. Of course, some people think aliens built it, which is probably ridiculous, that kind of thing. But yeah, you'll notice like in this particular, there's these relieving blocks they put above it. They were really worried, the Egyptians, that the pyramid would collapse down on the chamber. So they put those blocks in there to kind of hold the top of the pyramid up. There's also these mysterious air shafts that they found in the pyramid, which they've actually sent robots into. And it's kind of a debate about where those went and all of that, but some believe that those were built in there to allow the king's spirit to be able to leave the pyramid, or maybe come back and forth from the afterlife. And that's kind of, just theory about that, but that's what that is. So, but yeah, recently, a few years ago, like I said, they found some kind of, new little chamber in there, but they're not sure much about it, what it was used for. Then, of course, the second largest pyramid ever constructed, of course, in Egypt, of course, at the Giza complex, is the Pyramid of Khufu. Khufu, of course, was the son of King Khufu, who reigned after, one of the pharaohs that reigned after Khufu died. It's the second largest ever constructed, to a height of maybe close to about 470 or 71 feet. About 471 feet tall. It's about how tall it is overall. And the width on each side is a little smaller compared to the Great Pyramid. It's about 706 feet on each side, like the width on the base of it. So about 12, 13 acres in size, just like Khufu's Great Pyramid. Of course, in a lot of pictures, you'll see it with other pyramids together. Like you've probably, seen that. A lot of times they'll show a picture with, the one Khufu. Some people think, oh, that's the Great Pyramid. No, that's the actual Pyramid of Khufu, which is in the middle. It actually looks taller than Khufu's pyramid, but it's not. Now, the reason why it looks taller is because it's on a kind of a little plateau base there. So it's kind of looks taller, but it's not. So it's a little shorter than Khufu's Great Pyramid. It is famous for having the upper casing of it still there, like the base, like the top of it. So it's got some of the white limestone casing on it. So that's pretty much, the theory of why they think the pyramids were all white at one point. And his is not as elaborate as, Khufu's Great Pyramid. It's mostly got one main chamber in it where they buried Khafre. It's also called Khephren, the Greek name. And Khafre is also mentioned by, of course, the Greek writer Herodotus as well. So those are the two, the differences between the two pyramids that's there. Here's another picture, kind of hard to see it, but you can see the differences in the size between, what is Khafre's pyramid and what is the smaller one down there, which is King Menkaure, who's the son of Khafre, who's we'll talk about later as a whole. Now, there's also, of course, the famous Sphinx everybody's heard about, which is also called the Great Sphinx. It's called different names. Of course, a very mysterious statue that was constructed as part of the Giza complex that's there, built sometime around the 26th century BC. There's, of course, a big debate about, who constructed it, whose face is on it also as well. Of course, hopefully you get to see that documentary. Of course, that's on that particular subject. I told you about that documentary I gave you for that quiz on the 7 wonders of ancient Egypt. I'll also include in my YouTube channel just that kind of a clip from that video if you want to watch it, just that. But they think King Khafre built it. That's the theory. That's the popular theory, is that he constructed it. And to mostly honor, they think, his father, King Khufu, that built the Great Pyramid. And of course, some of the Egyptians believe that the Sphinx was built to kind of guard over the pyramids. And as you can see, it's got the body of a lion, which, of course, the reason why, of course, the lion was used as the main symbol of the pharaohs was because the lion was seen as all powerful. And I guess could destroy you if he wanted to. So it's got the head of a man, which is likely one of the pharaohs, with, of course, the body of a lion. And, of course, this was, they think, some kind of natural outcropping of limestone that was already there. They carved it out and made it into this royal statue, which you're looking at. The length of it is about 240 feet long, about 240 feet long. It's about how long it is. The height from like the top of the pharaoh's head to the bottom is maybe around 66 feet tall. And then the width is about 63 feet wide. That's there. Got another picture right here that I've got. It's also been, of course, it says been buried multiple times, which is true. It's been they've actually have some pictures where it's buried up to the neck with sand. And I think in ancient times, they actually thought it was a statue standing up. They didn't know it had a body of a lion to it until they unburied it overall. And there's also this dream stela. If you watch the video, they talk about that too, where one of the pharaohs of the New Kingdom, so I think is King Tutmos or Tutmosis IV, put it there because he had this dream that if he unburied the Sphinx, he would become pharaoh, which he was later. It doesn't have a nose. Of course, I don't know if you know much about that either, but apparently in modern times, people would use it as target practice and shoot at it, like with rifles or whatever, guns. And it's kind of a debate about when that happened, either on the Turks, maybe when they occupied Egypt, or I don't know, maybe Napoleon's forces may have shot at it too. There's kind of a debate about who did that or not, but that's why it doesn't have a nose. I think part of the nose is in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. It does have a nickname. They call it Father of Terror or Father of the Terror, either one, I guess. And they call it that because a lot of people were superstitious. They thought it was staring at you and watching over the valley of where the pyramids are built. And there's, of course, a lot of legends about the Sphinx, such as like if you're kind of a traveler wandering through the lands and you come upon the Sphinx, it would ask you a riddle, and if you can't answer it correctly, it would destroy you. So that's the story about the Sphinx, and all that. And it's one of the big mysteries, about the whole, Giza complex and the pyramids there. And some believe that the Sphinx is older than what it is. They might date back to before that time period. And it's gone through a lot of wear, erosion and so on. And so they've had to repair it multiple times. Then there's also this little bitty pyramid, of course, a smaller one that was built there, which was built by King Menkaure. It's also known as Mykerinos, is his Greek name that Herodotus, of course, called him. He was a son of King Sneferu that built the second pyramid there at Giza, and his was the smallest of the three. It's not that large. They think the original height of Menkaure's pyramid was only about 215 feet tall, so roughly 215. And I think the width on each side is smaller too, at about 339 feet on each side. So for the base, and 205 is the current height, but I think originally it was about 215 after they stripped it. So I don't know if you have to know much about the height on that one. It's not that big. And there's kind of a debate about why it was so small. Some theories, according to Herodotus, was that the rulers of Khufu and Khafre were like tyrannical. They made all these people build these massive tombs, which they think that's not really true anymore. Some people think they've kind of debunked that they weren't quite like that. But he said that Menkaure or Mykerinos was more benevolent and didn't want to build, a larger type pyramid. Though I think what they really think happened was that the pyramids, they just spent so much money on the first two that it was bankrupting the dynasty. And so that's why he built a smaller one. As you can see, he was in power almost 30 years. He could have built a larger one, but he didn't. So, and some of the pharaohs of the fourth dynasty even built like mastabas. They didn't build a pyramid and stuff like that. Also at the site, you'll see also these like smaller pyramids too, like at Giza, like the Queen's pyramids. They were built there, like this one that was built for one of Khufu's wives, actually his mother, built for his mother right there. They call it the Queen's pyramids or different names. And you'll notice they have like these boat pits. Like there's one right here. There's a couple boat pits. There's one large one they've reconstructed near the Great Pyramid of Giza. And these were designed to supposedly allow the pharaoh to take a celestial voyage, in the afterlife. They thought they might need not just food or whatever else for the afterlife, riches, but they would need like their boats, to sail through the afterworld or whatever. So yeah, the Egyptians built numerous pyramids throughout ancient Egypt, and part of why they stopped building them, of course, which we'll get more later, is all these pyramids, they got robbed by tomb robbers. A lot of the builders, like the workers that worked on them, obviously knew where they were, went back and robbed them, and so over time, what would happen, of course, is that the Egyptians realized that they couldn't build these type of tombs anymore. So up to about the Middle Kingdom, they start building them. And you'll see later in the New Kingdom, they start building rock-cut tombs that are buried secretively to try to hide the tombs of the pharaohs, and that's going to lead to the Valley of the Kings being built, which I'll get to later. So especially when we get to talking about the new kingdom and all that. Now, trying to think if there's any questions on here right now. It's like nobody up here. I am going to go ahead and I guess I'll go ahead and review. I don't know if I haven't really reviewed any much yet. I know from the last lecture we just discussed, I think, the early aspect of Egypt and talked about the early history and culture of it. So I'll go ahead and review a little bit what we've done so far. And I'll see if we have any time for anything else. Now, what are some geographic features that make the Nile unique overall? I told you how the fact that the Nile River is the longest river in the world. Like, I think I told you close to 4,200 miles long. And it is kind of strange in the fact that it flows from like south to north, from like Sudan and parts of East Central Africa. That's because of where the equator is. It's flowing down because of escarpments that go down toward the Mediterranean Sea. Of course, what famous quote is attributed to Herodotus on why Egypt flourished as a civilization? I told you that he said, Herodotus said in book 2 of his histories that Egypt was the gift of the Nile. It was a gift because the fact that the fertile waters and the silt allowed farming, and then farming led to, of course, civilization. So without it, Egypt would have been desert without that gift. What two rivers form the main trunk of the Nile River? The two main ones I told you were the Blue Nile and the White Nile. Blue Nile, I told you, starts in Ethiopia, like in the mountains of Ethiopia. It's fed mostly by monsoon seasonal rains. Then the White Nile starts way down in East Central Africa, close to where the main source of it is the Lake Victoria, largest lake in Africa. What do these Egyptian terms such as cataract, comet, deshret mean? Cataract is a term, Egyptian, really a Greek term, about the main 6 waterfalls, which the Nile River flows downward from Sudan into Egypt. So it starts high up in Sudan where Khartoum is, because at Khartoum, that's where the Blue Nile and the White Nile meet, form one trunk. Then there's like these 6 waterfalls where it flows downward into what is southern Egypt, where Aswan is. Word cataract is a Greek word which means waterfall. Comet is the ancient Greek hieroglyphic name for what they called Egypt, which Comet means in hieroglyphs, black land. Deshret was like the desert areas of Egypt, like outside the fertile plain of the Nile. That means red land in hieroglyphs. So you have the black land and the red land. What was the main season of Egypt when the Nile flooded? Akhet, and that was where during the summer months the Nile inundated with water, and that brought the water and the silt, which would fertilize the crops. Also told you they had 2 other growing seasons. One was called Peret, P-E-R-E-T, which was the season where they would sow their crops, mostly like start growing them, plant seed. And the other one's called Shema, S-H-E-M-U, Shema, which was like the harvest type season, which mostly they grew like grain crops, which was the main crops they grew, which bread was the main food they ate, especially the workers, bread and beer. What 2 Egyptian states emerged at the end of the Neolithic period? They got the Upper Kingdom and the Lower Kingdom. The Upper Kingdom was in what is the upper part of Egypt, which would be in the southern part of Egypt, close into the Upper Valley. And then the Lower Kingdom was in the lower part of Egypt, which is around the Delta area in northern Egypt. around where Cairo is. So both these states basically eventually unified as one state. And then the king that unified it, of course, was the king who goes by different names. The Greeks called him Menes. That's the common name. And I told you the Egyptian name they called him was King Narmer. And of course, Menes or Narmer was known for unifying Egypt. He took the two kingdoms and merged them together as one state. He also founded their main administrative capital, which was the city of Memphis, near the Delta area. And then also he founded one of their first dynasties, which where the pharaoh ruled with just one crown. I told you, where they took the two kingdoms' crowns, which was red and white. So he was the first to wear the double crown, King Menes or King Narmer. What were the three main historical kingdoms or periods of Egypt? The three main periods, of course, were the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. So it's usually the chronological order. Of course, the Old and New are the most famous. We've mostly just talked about the Old so far, but we'll probably on Wednesday's class, I'll talk about the New Kingdom. What was the cult of Amun-Ra? It was just like the nickname for the state religion of Amun, which was the state god, which was based at the Temple of Karnak. It was later merged with the god Ra, which was the sun god of Egypt. So those both are kind of seen as the same thing. So that's their most important god, the god Amun. What are some other major gods they had? I told you they had the god Anubis, who is the god of mummification, judge of the dead. He's important. He's known as the jackal god that was famous. The god Horus is the so-called falcon god, usually associated with the sky, the god of kingship. So he's very important as well. They also got the goddess Isis. Isis was a fertility goddess associated with also sex, love, alcohol, things like that. She was the mother of Horus in a lot of mythology. Osiris, the god Osiris, was another god. He was the king of the dead. He was, of course, the husband of Isis, and also in a lot of mythologies, the son of Horus. Who else I talked about? I talked about the gods Set or Seth, the brother of Osiris. He was like this cat god associated with like chaos, infertility, deserts, storms. I talked about Thoth. Thoth is the bird god associated with Egyptian writing and hieroglyphics. He's also used associated with like Egyptian knowledge, like anything from math, science, medicine. And then I told you about Sobek. Sobek, of course, the crocodile god of Egypt, associated with like power of the pharaoh. He was kind of like a war god also as well. What was mummification? Mummification is, of course, this nickname, Egyptian nickname, for the process of where they would embalm people for the afterlife. And it's also called Egyptian funerary practices. The word mummy or mummification came from an Arabic word, which is mumia, which was believed to be the Arabic term for what they called tar pitch, or also now like an asphalt material that they think was used in the process. There's more than 4 main processes, but I'll just kind of go through the main ones. But the main process I talked about was the fact that they had to remove the organs from the body, except for the heart, which the heart was usually kept in the body for the afterlife. The organs were usually put in canopic jars, and the canopic jars were these clay vessels that were usually guarded by the 4 sons of Horus. Which I don't know if you're going to have to know those or not. I think on the test, I'm probably not going to require you to know each one of the gods. I think that's kind of too difficult. But that, just know about the nickname of the 4 gods. So the 4 sons of Horus. After they would stuff the mummy like with different ingredients, according to Greeks like Herodotus, the big thing, the most important process, of course, in mummification was the preservation of the body from removing the moisture, which they used mineral salt, which the Greeks called it natron, Natron. Natron was a main process which took about 40 days. That was the most important process in the whole entire mummification. Then they think they put that tar pitch material or some kind of coating on the outside of the body, like an oil type coating, which probably had the tar in it. They used that to wrap the body multiple times, which was important with the preservation of the body, besides the removing of the moisture. Also, of course, and today we talked about some other stuff today, some new stuff that I've got. I mentioned, of course, I don't think I've got all the slides in here, it looks like it today, but I can go through those real quick, the ones I've got up now. Yeah, it says, what dynasties dominated the Old Kingdom? Third, fourth, fifth, sixth dynasties are usually the main ones that were part of the Old Kingdom that were there. The fourth dynasty being the most famous, that's there. Why is the Old Kingdom nicknamed the Age of Pyramids? Because that was the main period in ancient Egypt where a majority of the pyramids were constructed, although they did build some up to the Middle Kingdom as well. Abydos, Saqqara, Giza were all famous examples of necropolis sites where the ancient Egyptians buried their dead, like pharaohs and officials overall. We talked about some other ones like Midian and Dashur as well. And there's also the Valley of the Kings is, of course, another site during the New Kingdom. A mastaba is a type of Egyptian mud brick tomb that was real popular in ancient Egypt. And it was a term that the Arabs coined from the word mastaba, which means different translations, but it can mean stone bench or mud bench, they believe. And the Egyptians built these tombs to preserve the person's mummy, thinking that it would be like a house of eternity where their soul would live forever. Which dynasty and king developed the first pyramid at Saqqara? That was the third dynasty, King Zoser. Yeah, King Zoser. He built what is now called the Pyramid of Zoser, or a step pyramid of Zoser, which I've got a video on there, of course, in this lecture. Of course, I'll upload it to YouTube so you can see the separate one. But the architect was Imhotep, which there's a lot of mystery about Imhotep, but they do think he was a famous polymath and, of course, high priest. That was probably some kind of chancellor or minister to King Zoser. I don't know if I got time to go through the other one. I don't know if I have the other slide in there, do I? Yeah, it looks like it's missing for some reason, but I don't think I'm going to review that today. I'll just review it later is what I'll do. For some reason those questions are missing, so I'll add them later and I'll probably review it next time on the ones on the big pyramids that are later. So anyway, that's probably enough lecture and review today. Let me know if there's any questions you have about this lecture. Just comment questions for me on my YouTube channel. We had some people in the private chat. I think Kiara's asking a question, what French general invaded Egypt leading to the discovery? We haven't got to that yet because I didn't have enough time, but I'll get to the New Kingdom later. The next class I'm going to talk about on Wednesday, I'll talk about the discovery of the Rosetta Stone and how they were able to figure out, how they were able to translate hieroglyphs, because in the Middle Ages, it became a lost language, if you know about it. There's a guy named Funny Hat Napoleon you may have heard of. I guess I hit you on that one. That they, of course, find it and, they ended up translating it. Then, of course, after that, I'll talk about the rise of the New Kingdom. That's really considered the peak period of ancient Egypt, which is an empire building period. And I'll talk about all the great pharaohs they had during that time, who mostly built temples. And we'll talk about the building of the Valley of the Kings. So that's it for today. Just make sure, comment on my YouTube channel, send me questions about this lecture. So that's it for today. And I'll see you on Wednesday. And also, I will have a 1 o'clock lecture I'll have also that I'll stream to today as well. I guess it could be any question. They're probably like a make off of the Greek, riddle they have, but it could be anything, I guess, kind of question. So anyway, so that's it for today. So I will see you on Wednesday's class. All right.